regular programming.
How are you? How's everyone doing? Let's dive into the details and info. This is our second live stream on June. First, thanks so much to everyone who just joined us. A little while ago, Marcelo was there, Daniel was there, Alicia was there. We hope they'll join us for this live stream where we're going to talk about what's happening in the world. Well, now it's not just a seizure. France is actually taking over a Russian ship. The French have gone a step further than expected, honestly. And well, in response to this, there are already reactions at the international level. What's going on with these matters? What's happening with all of this? Well, a complete seizure of an oil tanker. This could trigger a strong reaction from the Kremlin. In fact, there is already a reaction from the Kremlin, and well, things are heating up between NATO and Russia itself. It's a huge issue. Obviously, let's get into the details. Let's get to the news. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for sharing and for liking. If you haven't done it yet, share this and subscribe. If you haven't done that either, sending you a hug. Let's get into the details. Look, let's start with the image, right? With an image that has also surprised people. It's this image. Look, there we can see the oil tanker. There are the helicopters and the French coming in. Really coming in now. Taking control of the oil tanker and taking it away, taking the oil tanker. I'm sure they'll report it. I'm sure this European power will report it, let's say, right? The French there in the Atlantic move quickly and Moscow is already reacting. We'll get into the details of Moscow's reaction in a moment, but France announced that it was completely seizing the oil tanker Tagor. This is a vessel linked to commercial networks related to Russia and Iran in an operation carried out in international waters of the Atlantic. The interception took place about 740 kilometers off the coast of Brittany. Yes, I mean, according to what the captain reported, after the Russian captain of the ship refused to obey the orders of the French authorities. Well then, the French decided to go after the ship directly. Where is Brittany located? Well, let's go to the map first. Let's go to this place. And they estimate it was about 700 kilometers, 720 kilometers, 40 kilometers from this area. So let's make a measurement here just to estimate where the event happened. Not 700, like we said, 40 kilometers. All right, more or less at this point. More or less at this point is where the French made their move. Let me see, it's around here. Let's say that at this point is where France made their move. Yes, it's around there. Let's zoom out a little more. That would be the area where they would have seized the ship. According to French authorities, the vessel was sailing irregularly under a Cameroonian flag, a situation that raised alarms about possible maneuvers to evade international sanctions. Emmanuel Macron defended the operation and stated that he will not allow sanctioned vessels to finance the war that Russia is waging. Regarding the war against Ukraine, Moscow reacted immediately. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov also came out to speak and said that this is piracy or something like that. Well, this is interesting because suddenly it's even a little bit, the reactions from the Kremlin showed anger, showing annoyance at this kind of move. But obviously only when it's done to them, not when they do it, right? Obviously, in response to this move, Moscow reacts by saying it's international piracy. And when they say it, that's one thing. But when Russia gives a warning, it's always a warning with their next step in mind. Or would be linked to an oil tycoon. Look who it is. It's Mohammed Hossein Chaukhani. No, he's Russian. So even though the interest or the ship is of Russian origin, the oil is Russian in theory. The one who manages it, or let's say the owner of the oil, would be an Iranian. or Mohammed or Hossein Chakani. France wasn't the only one involved in the operation. France is the one carrying out the operation. But let's say that within the operation, the United Kingdom was also involved, right? That's also another topic that hasn't been talked about much, but the United Kingdom was also involved in that coordination. They say the operation was backed by the United Kingdom and other European partners, showing it was coordinated. A close coordination to pursue the so-called Russian shadow fleet. France had already boarded other suspicious vessels since September, but this time it was because of the captain's resistance and because of the alleged simultaneous links with Russian and Iranian interests. The French prosecutor's office opened a criminal investigation into the why for the vessel's inability to properly display its nationality. In addition to the refusal to obey maritime instructions, experts believe that this episode could accelerate new sanctions. This is against vessels suspected of participating in trade evasion schemes related to Russian and Iranian oil. And this issue was already at a very delicate moment because in the end, well, this is the cherry on top that was missing lately hasn't happened. And Putin is very nervous. If you notice, look at him in the last few times he's appeared, how he's appeared. He's shown up angry, upset, he reacts. He even reacts to things people ask him about. And, well, he launched the Oreshnik again, not with the 100. Well, I mean, 2 people died. It's unfortunate. But we're talking about a very expensive missile, a missile that has a big visual impact. Well, the damage was less than it appeared, right? The reaction when you're already desperate to show something also starts to become a demonstration of weakness. And in light of this, the risks with this Russia issue are that there could be overreaction, sabotage, or acts of hybrid warfare, which might not be at the same level as what we've seen before. Right now, Russia has a need to show strength, and we have to be very, very attentive to this, because that's usually how they react. Now, if you do have capabilities right now, we'll have to see, because we have to remember that there's also something internal that has been shown. There's a lack of control. They're not following the Russians' orders, and they're sugarcoating things for the generals. Are they talking about mere Putin to calm him down? I mean, the people at ISW, which is this organization for forensic, digital, and military analysis. What they do is the Institute for the Study of War in Washington, which is a non-governmental organization. No, what they do is deeply analyze how the conflicts are going based on intelligence information, satellites, and leaks, etc. Right? Well, according to their data, what has been observed is that Russian generals were showing Putin fake maps of the advances they had made. It's not the first time this has happened, but this time it was just too blatant. There are cities that Putin thinks they've already taken, but that's not the case. So as long as that continues, Putin is going to keep doing his thing, but it's striking that they're reaching a very blatant level in that sense. Either they lie to him, the generals are so afraid of him that they prefer to give him that kind of information, or they just give him that information to keep him calm, while they know the operation is actually going in another direction. If France were to maintain full control of that ship and find out, if additional irregularities are found, we could be talking about a very different precedent where maybe France will start seizing these ships more aggressively. Pero it will depend on what irregularities are found, right? That will have a lot to do with it, right? But before, when these things have happened, that typical incident occurs where the underwater cables get damaged. It's happened before. For example, this happens in the Baltic Sea area with cables. whether they're for transporting electricity between Estonia and Finland, or internet cables serving these regions of the world, right? So basically, these NATO countries, right, keep an eye on that too. And continuing with the topic of Russia, there's something that really draws a lot of attention. The Russian economy, according to high-ranking European intelligence officials, is said to be in decline. And honestly, I don't think that's a surprise. The surprise is what's happening and how it's happening. So, what is Russia doing to avoid, let's say, a complete decline, right? That may also be part of what's important about this information. The new indication suggests that the conflict may be entering a stage that could be the most dangerous and perhaps the quietest so far. Officials, who I told you are from intelligence, say that Russia is intensifying operations in a very aggressive way. For what? To obtain Western technology and military secrets. In other words, the operations now are not just in Ukraine, but the operations are in Europe and Asia, to go and take them. Intelligence information, more specifically technical information about technology, where, according to the cited sources, the Kremlin would be using shell companies, spies, and cyber operations to access strategic information. European security services consider that this is not an isolated action, but rather an entire campaign taking place in Europe and other regions of the world, where different Russian intelligence agencies are operating, to take as many secrets as possible in a very aggressive way. That's it. Sweden, for example, a Scandinavian technological powerhouse, appears among the main targets due to its advances in defense and military development. Another important target would also be the technology related to Kazakh Ripon, considered one of the most important technological projects of the Swedes. There is also an interest in the laser systems used in education. Advanced cameras and space technology, even quantum developments and maritime capabilities with potential military use, in which the Russians are accelerating their efforts to steal the information. European intelligence officials also warn that Moscow is taking much greater risks than in previous years in order to obtain that information. The intensification of these operations would coincide with the 5th year of the war in Ukraine, which is also about to happen soon. According to financial reports, they indicate that the Russian budget deficit is widening more and more. In response to this, what they are looking for is to balance things out, so to speak, by trying to obtain technologies that they simply cannot buy, and therefore have to try to develop them in secret. Financial reports indicate that this Russian budget deficit is widening rapidly and could far exceed what had been predicted. The situation is that a collapse in finances could occur. The Russian finance minister himself has already warned about a multi-million-dollar overrun linked to the war. I mean, the Russian defense minister has already warned about it several times, but this time it's another country, which is Estonia. He also warns that if the sanctions continue to put pressure on Russia, they would be facing the most serious economic problem in recent Russian history. The big question right now is, so how do you accelerate a technology, military technology, if you don't have the budget? Well, how? By going after it, basically stealing it, right? So obviously, this is also an important part of what's happening. Another thing is that in Hungary, near this whole area where Russia is trying to keep exerting influence, we have to remember that Viktor Orbán was there. If he, who was the Hungarian president, doesn't win the elections, he's out. After so many years of being in power, he's out. Orbán was a president who, despite being from a NATO country, was very favorable to Russia. But then a new president comes in. It's Tamás Sziliuk. Do you remember? But they have a president and they have a prime minister who is Péter Magyar. Well, the new Prime Minister of Hungary is facing off against the head of state because he refuses to resign, because he doesn't want to step down. The government of Hungary has started a process to remove the president of the country. Tamás Sziliuk, or rather Viktor Orbán, was the Prime Minister. Peter enters as the new Prime Minister, and then there's the president. Well, let's say he's favorable to Viktor Orbán and doesn't want to leave. I mean, he doesn't want to because he would have to resign. I mean, no, it's not like that. I mean, no, but normally they do it because they say, well, I no longer share the same ideals as the Prime Minister, so I resign because there's now a majority from the opposition. Either you resign or they fire you. But if they fire you, it takes longer. So right now, the president, who is like, let's say, the second in command for the Hungarians, doesn't want to step down. So they're going to have to do other things. According to what was announced today, on Monday, there was a press conference. The Prime Minister, Peter Magyar, the new Prime Minister, came out and basically gave the president an ultimatum to step down, right? They've done everything. I mean, the outgoing government, which Viktor Orbán and all of them are part of, they've done everything. They've been burning paperwork. They've been destroying it. They've been doing a lot of things to leave no trace of everything they were doing during their time in government. That also obviously shows that they must have done something that isn't legally sustainable, so to speak, right? So that's also part of what's happening right now. Let's move on to other important details as well. Let's discuss other interesting things happening in the world. Let me tell you that right now, they would already be reacting. Wall Street and oil are reacting to what's happening with this breakdown in negotiations. Crude oil is already above $100 a barrel. And I think we're going to be following up on this pretty much all day, right? Oil looks set to stay above 100, or at least remain above it. So far, it hasn't gone over 101, but I imagine this must be a major concern, right? Meanwhile, the dollar compared to the euro, for example, is at 0.86. So the dollar isn't doing badly or well, right? I mean, let's say after this drop it had since basically when Trump started, right? That's this drop. Look, that's the drop. And it stays down, right? So oil tried to rebound with the dollar during all this. But this drop has, well, more or less to do with Trump coming in, basically. And regarding the Mexican peso, well, look, the peso is strong since the dollar was once trading at around 21.32. Yes. Since the fall of the dollar against the peso began right now, it's below 18%. Below 18. Since then, let's look at the approximate date. March 2025, from March 2025 to now. So a little more than a year. The dollar has lost. It has lost 18, almost a fifth of the dollar's value has been lost compared to the peso. In other words, the strong peso. In that sense, that also draws attention. Obviously, a lot of people who come from the United States to live here, and there are more and more. It's a lot of people. They're surprised, saying they thought a dollar would cover everything, but now it's not enough. It just doesn't work that way. And then the people who send remittances also say, hey, I send money, but it's not enough for them because the dollar isn't worth as much anymore. So, well, it's positive for some things, but also negative for others, right? So obviously, well, it's part of what's happening right now, isn't it? And well, let's quickly go to the comments. How have you been? Thank you so much to the whole community. Adilson Eliseo, very good. Greetings. Miguel says here, he says, well, here in Uruguay, The exchange rate keeps getting away from us. The boat is leaking, he says. The exchange rate keeps getting away from us. The boat is leaking, says Miguel. Either you're broke or it's as strong as it is, Miguel says. Ugh. A shame and a lack of respect for Julieta Venegas' World Cup song. Right? If not, no, I didn't really like it, honestly. I mean, I'm really confused. I don't know what do you expect in a World Cup song? Honestly, I think, right? It's, well, passion for soccer. Good sportsmanship, friendship among everyone. That's it. What you don't expect from a World Cup song is wanting to say, this is right, this is wrong. That's very good. I mean, the issue of everyone's rights. Everything is fine for each person in their own time. But in the World Cup song, what you expect is that passion for the sport, friendship with the world. Is that all there is to it? Beyond that, it just gets boring. It gets boring. So, right? Well, yeah, totally, right? He finally says, that's it. He's done with it. Russia. Greetings, Pantelita. How have you been? Hello, Daniel. How are you? Greetings. Hello. Who else is around here in rubles? OAF. Great. As you can see, how's it going for the World Cup? It's almost here, right? There's hardly any time left, is there? There's almost no time left now. Everyone's rushing around. Really rushing. Getting everything ready, obviously. Hey, let's go to the next live. We have a live stream, okay? Big events are already unfolding in Israel, and things are getting intense. That's a main reason we discussed it in the first live stream. About the end of the agreement. There's no longer any agreement between Israel and the United States, and what's happening right now. Let's get into it.